I didn't think twice about stepping into the living room that night. It was late, and I'd only gotten up to grab a glass of water. I wasn't expecting anyone to be awake. Not my husband, Marcus, who was on another business trip, or Adrian, my stepson, who usually stayed holed up in his room until noon. So when I saw him sitting on the couch, I froze. Not because he startled me, but because of the way he was looking at me. His eyes locked on me, unblinking, and it took me a moment to realize why. That's when it hit me. My nightgown. It was thin, far too thin, especially under the glow of the dim floor lamp beside him. Sheer fabric clung to my skin, revealing far more than I'd intended. "Adrian," I managed, my voice softer than I'd meant. He didn't answer, his gaze trailing over me in a way that made my stomach twist, not with discomfort, but with something far more dangerous. I clutched the neckline of the gown, suddenly self-conscious, but it was too late. The look in his eyes said everything. I turned quickly, muttering an excuse about needing water, but my hand trembled as I grabbed the glass from the sink. I could feel his presence still in the room, heavy, unspoken. When I finally glanced back, he was still staring, his expression unreadable but intense enough to make me catch my breath. That was the moment, the shift. I suppose I should tell you who I am, and how I got to this place where a single look from my stepson could unravel me. My name is Evelyn, a name that feels too refined for the mess I've made of my life. I'm 53, the second wife of Marcus Hallworth, a man who's as dependable as he is distant. Marcus has built a career and a reputation on being reliable, but that reliability doesn't extend to his personal life. When I married him 10 years ago, I thought I'd finally found stability after years of struggling as a single mother. My first husband left me with little more than debt and a broken heart, and Marcus offered me something I hadn't had in years: security. But security isn't love, and over time, our marriage became more of a partnership than a romance. Marcus travels often, leaving me alone in the sprawling house filled with expensive furniture, but no warmth. I used to fill the emptiness with hobbies, gardening, painting. But lately, even that feels like going through the motions. I've become a fixture in my own home, a woman who fades into the background unnoticed. That is, until Adrian came back. He's 24 now, freshly graduated and home for the summer, while he figures out his next steps. I've known him since he was a teenager, polite, quiet, and always a little withdrawn. But the Adrian who came back this summer is different. He carries himself with a quiet confidence, a sharpness in his gaze that wasn't there before. He's grown into himself, and for the first time, I can't help but notice. I tell myself it's harmless, a passing thought. But that night in the living room, when I caught him looking at me like that, something shifted. I went back to bed, lying awake for hours, replaying the scene in my head. The way his gaze lingered, the tension in the air, and the way my own body betrayed me, a heat rising in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. It was just a look, I told myself, a momentary lapse. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That night marked the beginning of something I couldn't name yet, something I wasn't ready to admit to myself. Because when I woke up the next morning, the memory of Adrian's gaze wasn't something I wanted to forget. It was something I wanted to feel again. The morning after that night in the living room, everything felt sharper. I was hyper-aware of Adrian's presence in a way I hadn't been before. His movements around the house, the way his voice carried when he spoke on the phone, even the faint scent of his cologne that lingered in the hallway. It all felt amplified. I spent the day trying to keep myself busy, scrubbing the kitchen counters and reorganizing the pantry as if cleaning could erase the memory of his stare. But by the time dinner rolled around, I was a wreck. Marcus was still out of town, leaving just Adrian and me to share an awkward meal. I avoided his eyes, focusing on my plate as if the roasted chicken required intense concentration. "You've been quiet today," Adrian said finally, breaking the silence. I glanced up, startled. His tone was casual, but the weight of his gaze wasn't. "Just tired," I said, forcing a smile. "You sure that's all it is?" The question hung in the air, heavy and pointed. I could feel my cheeks flush, and I quickly looked away, pretending to be interested in refilling my water glass. "You know," he continued, his voice softer now, "about last night?" My hand froze mid-pour. "What about last night?" "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said, leaning back in his chair. "It's just, I wasn't expecting to see you like that. My pulse quickened. Adrian, it's fine. Let's just forget about it. Can you? He asked, his voice low, almost daring. I couldn't answer. Instead, I stood abruptly, gathering my plate. I'm going to clean up. I heard his chair scrape against the floor as he stood, following me into the kitchen. Evelyn, he said, his voice closer now. I turned to face him, clutching the plate like a shield. Adrian, stop. He paused, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, stepping back. Okay, I'll stop, for now. The way he said it, soft but certain, sent a shiver down my spine. The days that followed were a delicate balancing act. Adrian didn't push, but he didn't retreat either. He was always there, lingering at the edges of my world, watching, waiting. One evening, a storm rolled in, knocking out the power. Marcus was still in New York, and the house felt cavernous and empty as the rain lashed against the windows. I lit candles in the living room, their warm glow doing little to dispel the tension that had been simmering between Adrian and me. You okay? He asked, stepping into the room. I'm fine, I said, setting a candle on the coffee table. He sat on the couch, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, tracking my movements. You don't seem fine. I sighed, sitting down across from him. It's just the storm. It makes the house feel lonely. You don't have to be lonely, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My breath caught, but I forced myself to laugh, brushing off his words. You've been spending too much time reading those dramatic novels. He didn't laugh. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Evelyn, we both know what this is. My heart pounded. What are you talking about? This, he said, gesturing between us. I see the way you look at me, and I know you've noticed the way I look at you. Adrian? I'm not a kid anymore, he interrupted. I'm not some teenager with a crush. I know what I want. His words sent a wave of heat through me, but I shook my head, standing abruptly. This conversation is over. I turned to leave, but his hand shot out, gently grabbing my wrist. The contact was electric, sending a jolt through my entire body. Evelyn, he said softly, his eyes locking onto mine. Don't walk away. For a moment I stood frozen, torn between every instinct screaming at me to leave and the undeniable pull keeping me rooted in place. Please, he murmured, his voice cracking just enough to betray the vulnerability beneath his boldness. That was what undid me. I sat back down, my heart hammering as he let go of my wrist. The air between us was heavy, charged with something I couldn't name. This is dangerous, I whispered. Sometimes danger is worth it. He replied, his voice steady. The first time was tentative, a collision of longing and restraint that neither of us could hold back any longer. It happened in the faint glow of candlelight, the storm outside muffling the sound of our breaths. When it was over, I lay in his arms, staring at the flickering shadows on the ceiling. This can't happen again, I said, my voice trembling. Why not? He asked, his tone calm but firm. Because it's wrong, I said, pulling away. Because Marcus doesn't deserve you, he interrupted, sitting up. He doesn't even see you, Evelyn. But I do. His words sliced through me, and for a moment I couldn't respond. I need time, I said finally, standing and gathering my robe around me. Please, Adrian. He nodded, his gaze intense. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. But time didn't make it easier. If anything, it made it worse. The tension between us grew, spilling into every interaction. A brush of hands in the kitchen. A lingering glance across the dinner table. The way his voice softened whenever he said my name. I tried to keep my distance, but it was impossible. Adrian had become the center of my thoughts, my pulse quickening whenever I heard his footsteps in the hall. And then, one evening, Marcus called. I'll be home tomorrow, he said, his voice brisk. I've been gone too long. The words sent a wave of panic through me. Marcus's presence would shatter the fragile world Adrian and I had built, forcing us back into the roles we were supposed to play. After I hung up, I found Adrian in the garden, his hands buried in the soil as he tended to the flowers I'd planted months ago. He's coming back, I said, my voice shaking. Adrian looked up, his expression unreadable. So what do we do? I don't know, I whispered. He stood, brushing the dirt from his hands as he stepped closer. We don't have to stop, Evelyn. We just have to be careful. Careful? I repeated, my voice rising. Adrian, this is insane. We're going to get caught. Then let's get caught, he said, his tone defiant. I stared at him, stunned. What are you talking about? I'm tired of pretending, he said. I'm tired of hiding. I don't care what anyone thinks. But I do, I said, tears welling in my eyes. I can't lose everything, Adrian. I can't lose you. He cupped my face, his gaze fierce. You're not going to lose me, ever. His words were a promise, but they felt like a warning. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. Marcus's impending return loomed over me, and Adrian's words echoed in my mind. We don't have to stop. We just have to be careful. But I knew deep down that careful wouldn't be enough. The storm we'd started was already too big to contain, and it was only a matter of time before it consumed us both. Marcus returned the next afternoon, carrying his usual air of authority that filled the house. He greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek, barely looking up from his phone, and gave Adrian a curt nod. It's good to have you back, I said, forcing a smile as I took his suitcase. He glanced at me, his brow furrowing slightly. You look tired. Are you sleeping well? I'm fine, I said, quickly turning away before he could see the flush creeping up my neck. Adrian said nothing, his eyes fixed on Marcus with a calm that betrayed none of the chaos that had consumed us in Marcus's absence. That evening, I found myself standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing dishes while Marcus worked in his office. Adrian came in quietly, his presence like a magnetic pull I couldn't ignore. You're going to break that plate, he said softly, gesturing to the one I was gripping too tightly. I set it down, my hands trembling. You need to stop, I whispered, not daring to look at him. Stop what? He asked, stepping closer. This. The way you look at me, the way you linger, I said, finally turning to face him. Adrian tilted his head, his eyes locked onto mine. Do you want me to stop? My breath hitched. I didn't answer. His hand brushed mine as he reached for a towel, his touch sending a jolt through me. You don't have to keep pretending, Evelyn, not with me. Adrian, we can't keep doing this, I said, my voice trembling. But we are, he said, his voice steady. And we will. I stepped back, putting distance between us as footsteps sounded in the hall. Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking between us with a curious expression. Everything okay in here? He asked, his tone casual but sharp. Fine, I said quickly, my voice too high. Adrian nodded, his face a perfect mask of calm. Just helping with the dishes. Marcus lingered for a moment, his gaze flicking between us, before retreating back to his office. The tension in the house became unbearable in the days that followed. Marcus's presence was a constant reminder of the line Adrian and I had crossed. But it also made every stolen glance and whispered word between us all the more thrilling. One evening, Marcus announced that he'd invited an old friend over for dinner. Philip Caldwell, he said, pouring himself a glass of scotch. You remember him, don't you, Evelyn? I nodded, though the name sent a ripple of unease through me. Philip was an investigator, sharp, shrewd, and far too observant for my liking. When he arrived, his handshake was firm, his smile polite but assessing. As we sat down to dinner, I felt his eyes on me more than once, his gaze lingering just a moment too long. This is quite the house, Philip said, looking around. Marcus always did have a taste for the finer things. Marcus chuckled. Well, it helps to have a wife who knows how to make a house feel like home. I forced a smile, my stomach twisting as Philip's gaze shifted to Adrian. And you, he said, leaning back in his chair. What's your plan, Adrian? Following in your father's footsteps? Adrian shrugged, his tone measured. I'm still figuring things out. Philip's smile didn't reach his eyes. Smart. No need to rush into anything. The rest of the evening passed uneventfully, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Philip was watching me, studying the dynamics of our household with a precision that made my skin crawl. That night, I found Adrian waiting for me in the garden, his figure barely visible in the moonlight. He knows something, I said, wrapping my arms around myself. Philip? Adrian asked, his tone calm. I nodded. I can feel it. The way he looks at us, it's like he's putting pieces together. Let him, Adrian said, stepping closer. He doesn't have anything on us. But what if he finds something? I whispered, my voice trembling. He reached out, his hand brushing against my cheek. Then we'll deal with it, together. The following day, things took an unexpected turn. I was in the study, sorting through a stack of mail, when I came across an envelope addressed to me in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper with a typed message. I know what you've been doing. Meet me at the diner on 5th at 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone. My hands shook as I reread the note. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a name to know who had sent it. Something wrong? Marcus's voice startled me, and I quickly folded the note, slipping it into my pocket. No, nothing, I said, forcing a smile. That evening, I told Marcus I was meeting a friend for coffee. He barely looked up from his laptop as I left, my heart pounding as I made my way to the diner. Lila was waiting for me in a corner booth, her expression smug as I slid into the seat across from her. You've been busy, she said, stirring her coffee. What do you want? I asked, cutting straight to the point. She smiled, leaning back in her chair. Money, of course. Enough to make me forget what I've seen. I clenched my fists under the table. You don't have any proof. Don't I? She said, pulling out her phone. She tapped the screen, and my blood ran cold as I saw a grainy photo of Adrian and me in the garden, his hand on my cheek. Delete it, I said, my voice shaking. Not until I get what I want, she replied. 50,000 by the end of the week. I don't have that kind of money, I said, my mind racing. Then figure it out, she said, standing and slipping her phone back into her purse. Because if you don't, Marcus will be the first to know. When I told Adrian about the meeting, he was furious. She's bluffing, he said, pacing the room. She has photos, I said, my voice trembling. And she's not bluffing, Adrian, she's serious. Then we'll pay her, he said. With what? I asked. I don't have access to that kind of money, and neither do you. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkening. Then we'll find another way. Over the next few days, the tension in the house reached a breaking point. Marcus seemed oblivious, but Philip's presence loomed like a storm cloud. One afternoon, I overheard Philip and Marcus talking in the study. There's something off about Adrian, Philip said. I'd keep an eye on him if I were you. What are you getting at? Marcus asked, his tone wary. Philip hesitated. Just a feeling. Call it professional intuition. That night, Adrian came to my room, his expression grim. We can't keep this up, he said. What do you mean? I asked, my heart sinking. This house, this situation, it's too dangerous, he said. We need to leave. Leave? I repeated, stunned. He nodded. Just you and me. We'll go somewhere far away, start over. Adrian, that's insane, I said. What's insane is staying here, pretending everything's fine when it's not, he said, his voice rising. I shook my head, tears welling in my eyes. I can't just walk away, Adrian. From Marcus, from this life. Do you love him? Adrian interrupted, his tone sharp. I froze. That's what I thought, he said, his voice softening. Evelyn, I love you, and I can't stand the thought of losing you. His words broke something inside me, and I pulled him into an embrace, clinging to him like he was the only thing keeping me afloat. But even as I held him, a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered that this wasn't over. The storm was still coming, and when it hit, it would leave nothing unscathed. The following day, everything started to unravel faster than I could contain it. Adrian's plea to leave together echoed in my mind, but no matter how much I wanted to give in, the thought of disappearing felt impossible. Marcus was still oblivious, wrapped up in his work, but Philip's presence lingered like a shadow. And then there was Lila, whose demands were growing louder and more urgent. That morning, as I sat in the kitchen nursing a cup of coffee, Marcus walked in, looking sharper than usual in a tailored navy suit. I'll be out most of the day, he said, scrolling through emails on his phone. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. A meeting downtown, he replied, looking up briefly. Philip's coming with me. Something about loose ends he wants to tie up. Loose ends. The phrase sent a chill through me. What kind of loose ends? I asked, my fingers tightening around the mug. Marcus shrugged. Nothing for you to worry about, just business. But as he kissed me on the cheek and walked out the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't telling me the whole truth. By mid-afternoon, my anxiety was spiraling. Adrian was out, probably trying to find a way to deal with Lila, and I was left alone in the house with nothing but my thoughts. I paced the living room, my mind racing with possibilities. And then, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Lila stood there, her arms crossed and her expression smug. You're late, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice trembling. The money, she replied, turning to face me. I told you I wanted it by today. I told you I don't have that kind of money, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, that's unfortunate, she said, pulling out her phone. because Marcus might be very interested in seeing these. She held up the screen, and there it was again, the photo of Adrian and me in the garden, clear enough to erase any doubt about what was happening between us. "Lila, please," I said, my voice breaking. "You don't have to do this." "Oh, but I do," she said, her tone mocking. "Unless, of course, you suddenly figure out how to meet my price." Before I could respond, the front door opened, and Adrian walked in. He froze when he saw Lila, his eyes narrowing. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Just having a little chat with your stepmother," Lila said, smirking. Adrian stepped forward, his posture tense. "You need to leave." "Not until I get what I came for," she said, holding up her phone. Adrian's gaze hardened, and before I could stop him, he snatched the phone from her hand. "Hey!" Lila shouted, reaching for it, but Adrian held it out of her reach. "This ends now," he said, his voice cold. "You think that's my only copy?" she sneered. Adrian didn't flinch. "If you so much as breathe a word of this to anyone, I'll make sure you regret it." Lila's eyes widened for a moment, but she quickly recovered, her smirk returning. "Big talk. Let's see if you can back it up." With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. "She's not going to stop," I said, my voice shaking. "She will," Adrian said, his tone firm. "I'll make sure of it." "How?" I asked, my chest tightening. "Adrian, this isn't something you can just fix." "She's a problem, and I'll handle her," he said, his gaze unwavering. His words sent a shiver through me, but before I could press him further, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "It's Marcus," he said. "What does he want?" I asked, my heart pounding. Adrian hesitated. "He says he's on his way home, and he wants to talk." When Marcus arrived, the atmosphere in the house shifted immediately. He walked in with purpose, his expression unreadable as he set his briefcase down in the study. "Evelyn, Adrian," he called, his voice calm but commanding. "Can you both join me?" Adrian and I exchanged a glance before following him. Marcus stood behind his desk, his hands resting on the polished wood surface as he looked between us. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I had an interesting conversation with Philip today," he said, his tone measured. My stomach dropped. "About what?" Marcus's gaze settled on Adrian. "About you." Adrian didn't flinch. "What about me?" Marcus leaned forward slightly. "He seems to think there's something unusual about the way you've been acting lately, especially around Evelyn." The room went silent. "Marcus, that's ridiculous," I said quickly. "Philip's just stirring up trouble." "Is he?" Marcus asked, his gaze shifting to me. "Because I've been noticing things too. The way you two look at each other. The way you avoid being in the same room as me." My breath caught, and I felt Adrian's hand brush against mine, a silent gesture of reassurance. "You're imagining things," Adrian said, his voice calm. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Am I?" Before anyone could respond, the front door burst open, and Philip walked in, a file folder in his hand. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his tone anything but apologetic, "but I thought you might want to see this." He placed the folder on the desk and opened it, revealing a series of documents. Marcus's expression darkened as he scanned the pages. "What is this?" he asked, his voice cold. "Evidence," Philip said. "Your wife and your son have been keeping secrets, but so have you." Marcus looked up sharply. "What are you talking about?" Philip leaned back, a smug smile on his face. "Your little side business, the offshore accounts, the money laundering, it's all here." The blood drained from Marcus's face. "Where did you get this?" "I have my sources," Philip said. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The room erupted into chaos. Marcus shouted at Philip, accusing him of betrayal, while Adrian stood protectively in front of me. "This is insane," I said, my voice shaking. "No, what's insane is what's been happening under my roof," Marcus snapped, turning his fury on me. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? About him? About you?" I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Marcus, save it," he said, his voice cold. "You've humiliated me. You've ruined this family." "That's enough," Adrian said, stepping forward. Marcus turned on him. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing but a selfish, arrogant child." "That's funny," Adrian said, his voice steady, "coming from a man who's been lying to everyone he's ever known." Marcus's hand clenched into a fist, and for a moment, I thought he might hit him. But before he could, Philip stepped between them. "Gentlemen," he said, his tone sharp, "let's not make this any uglier than it already is." In the end, Marcus agreed to stay quiet about Adrian and me, but only on one condition. I had to help him cover up his crimes. You're already implicated, he said, his tone icy. The accounts are in your name. If I go down, so do you. I had no choice but to agree. But as I sat in my room that night, staring at the ceiling, I knew this was far from over. Adrian came to me, his expression heavy with guilt. This isn't your fault, he said softly. Yes, it is, I said, tears streaming down my face. I should have stopped this before it started. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. We'll figure it out, I promise. But deep down, I knew that some promises couldn't be kept. The storm we'd unleashed was only beginning, and the consequences would be far more devastating than either of us could imagine. The morning after Marcus's ultimatum, the house felt different, colder, heavier, as if the walls themselves were suffocating me. I could barely meet Adrian's eyes as we moved around each other in the kitchen, the weight of Marcus's threats hanging between us. Marcus left early for a meeting, but not before reminding me, in his cold, clipped tone, of the consequences if I crossed him. We're tied together now, he said before walking out the door. Don't forget that. The sound of his car pulling out of the driveway was a relief, but it was short-lived. Adrian cornered me in the hallway not long after, his expression dark and determined. What did he say to you last night? Adrian asked, his voice low. I hesitated, knowing how furious he'd be if he knew the truth. It's nothing we can't handle. Don't do that, he said sharply. Don't brush it off. I can see it in your eyes. He's threatening you, isn't he? I looked away, but he grabbed my wrist gently, forcing me to meet his gaze. Evelyn, what is he holding over you? He wants me to help him cover his tracks, I admitted finally, my voice shaking. He's using the accounts in my name to keep me quiet. If I don't cooperate, Then we'll expose him first, Adrian interrupted. It's not that simple, I said, my voice rising. If he goes down, he'll make sure I go down with him. Adrian, I'm already implicated in his crimes. He's made sure of it. Then we'll find a way out, he said firmly. Together. How? I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. He pulled me into his arms, his voice soft but resolute. We'll figure it out. I'm not letting him ruin you, Evelyn. Not for his mistakes. That evening, I overheard Marcus on the phone in his study. His voice low and urgent. Philip's getting too close, he said. We need to handle this quietly. No loose ends. The phrase sent a chill down my spine. I stepped closer to the door, straining to hear. If it comes to it, Marcus continued, we may need to cut ties entirely. You know what I mean? My stomach turned. He wasn't just talking about silencing Philip. He was talking about eliminating him. I found Adrian in the garden later that night, pacing near the edge of the property. I told him everything I'd heard, my voice trembling as I recounted Marcus's words. He's planning something, I said. Something dangerous. Adrian's expression darkened. We need to stop him. How? I asked, my voice breaking. Adrian, he has all the power. He has the money, the connections. He doesn't have you, Adrian said, his voice firm. And that's what terrifies him. The next morning everything came to a head. I woke to the sound of raised voices coming from the study. Adrian and Marcus were arguing, their words muffled but heated. My heart raced as I crept closer, staying out of sight. You're a selfish, reckless bastard, Marcus spat. You've jeopardized everything I've built. And you're a liar and a coward, Adrian shot back. You've been using Evelyn to cover your crimes, and I won't let you drag her down with you. Marcus's voice dropped, cold and menacing. What are you going to do, Adrian? Run to the police? They'll laugh you out of the station. You're nothing but a spoiled boy who doesn't know his place. Maybe not, Adrian said, but I know enough to ruin you. The room went silent and I held my breath, terrified of what would happen next. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice eerily calm. If you want to ruin me, go ahead. But know this, I'll take Evelyn down with me. Everything she's worked for, everything she's built, it'll all be gone. Do you really want that on your conscience? I stepped into the room before Adrian could respond, my voice shaking. Stop it. Both of you. They turned to me, their faces tense and angry. This has gone too far, I said, my chest tightening. Marcus, if you care about me at all, you'll stop this. Let it go. He laughed bitterly. Care about you? Don't kid yourself, Evelyn. You're just another pawn in this game. Adrian moved toward him, his fists clenched, but I stepped between them, my voice rising. Enough. I won't let you destroy each other. Marcus sneered. You think you can stop this? It's already too late. Later that evening, Adrian and I made a decision. We have to leave, he said, his voice firm. There's no other way. I nodded, my heart heavy. But what about Marcus? He'll come after us. Let him, Adrian said. We'll disappear. He won't be able to touch us. We packed quickly, taking only what we needed. But as we were leaving, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway froze us in our tracks. Marcus stepped out, his face twisted with rage as he marched toward us. Going somewhere? He asked, his voice cold. Let us go, Marcus, I said, my voice trembling. He shook his head, his laughter bitter. You think you can just walk away from this? From me? Adrian stepped forward, his posture tense. We're done, Marcus. You've lost. Have I? Marcus said, his gaze shifting to me. You think he can protect you, Evelyn? He's a boy playing at being a man. He'll abandon you the second things get tough. That's enough, Adrian said, his voice steady. Marcus sneered. You're nothing, Adrian, and she'll see that soon enough. Before Marcus could say more, Adrian grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the car. We're leaving, he said. Marcus didn't stop us. He just stood there, his expression dark and triumphant, as if he'd already won. We drove for hours, the tension between us thick and heavy. I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus wasn't finished, that he'd find a way to drag us back into his web. As we pulled into a quiet motel on the outskirts of a small town, Adrian turned to me, his expression serious. We'll figure this out, he said softly. I nodded, though the weight of everything we'd left behind pressed heavily on my chest. In the end, we weren't free. Not really. Marcus's threat still lingered, a shadow over everything we tried to build. But as Adrian pulled me into his arms that night, whispering promises of a future where we could finally be happy, I let myself believe, if only for a moment, that we could escape the past. And maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to start over, together. The quiet hum of the motel's air conditioner was the only sound that filled the room, as I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the cheap floral wallpaper. Adrian stood by the window, peeking through the blinds every few minutes like he expected Marcus to appear at any moment. We can't stay here forever, I said, breaking the silence. I know, Adrian replied, his voice tight. He had been calm during the drive, resolute even, but now I could see the cracks beginning to show. The tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched every time he glanced outside, it was only a matter of time before the weight of everything we'd done caught up with him. We need a plan, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Adrian turned to face me, his expression hard. The plan is to keep moving, stay ahead of him. You think Marcus is just going to let this go? I asked, standing to face him. You heard what he said. He'll come after us. Let him, Adrian said, his voice low and dangerous. I'm not afraid of him. It's not just you, Adrian, I snapped, my voice rising. It's me he wants to punish, and if he finds us, he'll destroy both of us. Adrian stepped closer, his hands gripping my arms gently but firmly. I won't let that happen. Do you hear me? I'll protect you, Evelyn, no matter what. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that we could outrun Marcus, that we could build a life together, far from the wreckage we'd left behind. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Marcus wasn't the kind of man to let go of a grudge, especially not one as personal as this. The first sign that Marcus was closing in came 2 days later. We were in a small diner just outside of Denver, eating in tense silence when Adrian's phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, his brow furrowing as he read the screen. It's an unknown number, he said, showing me the message. You can run, but you can't hide forever. My stomach dropped. It's him. Adrian's jaw tightened. Let him play his games. He's not scaring me. But the look in his eyes told a different story. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside the motel, the crunch of gravel under tires, the distant hum of a passing car, set my nerves on edge. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I woke to the sound of Adrian's voice, low and urgent. What do you mean you can't help? He was saying. I sat up, my heart pounding, as I watched him pace the room, his phone pressed to his ear. Fine, he said finally, his voice sharp. Then I'll figure it out myself. He ended the call and turned to face me, his expression grim. Who was that? I asked. A friend, he said, running a hand through his hair. I thought he could help us disappear, but he's too scared to get involved. What do we do now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed, his shoulders slumping. We keep moving. We don't stop until we're so far off the grid that even Marcus can't find us. But for how long? I asked, tears welling in my eyes. Adrian, we can't live like this forever. We don't have a choice, he said, his voice breaking. The breaking point came 3 days later. We were on the road, heading west toward a town Adrian said was small enough to disappear in, when we noticed the car behind us. It had been following us for miles, staying just far enough back to avoid suspicion, but neither of us could ignore the nagging sense that we were being watched. It's him, Adrian said, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Are you sure? I asked, my voice trembling. Adrian didn't answer. Instead, he took the next exit, weaving through side streets in an attempt to lose our tail. But the car stayed with us, its headlights glaring in the rearview mirror. Hold on, Adrian said, his voice tense as he made a sharp turn onto a gravel road. The car behind us hesitated for a moment before following, its tires kicking up dust as it closed the distance between us. Adrian, what are you doing? I asked, panic rising in my chest. I'm ending this, he said, his voice steady. He brought the car to a sudden stop, throwing it into park before stepping out. Stay here, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I watched as he approached the other car, his shoulders squared and his fists clenched. The driver's door opened and Marcus stepped out, his face twisted with rage. You've got some nerve, Marcus said, his voice cold. This ends now, Adrian said, his voice low but firm. Marcus laughed bitterly. You think you can threaten me? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I'm not afraid of you, Adrian said, stepping closer. You should be, Marcus said, pulling a gun from his coat. My breath caught in my throat as I scrambled out of the car, my heart pounding. Marcus, stop, he turned to me, his eyes narrowing. This is your fault, Evelyn. You made this mess. Put the gun down, I said, my voice shaking. Why should I? He asked, his tone mocking. You've already destroyed everything. Why not finish the job? Adrian lunged at him, grabbing for the gun. A shot rang out, echoing through the empty road. For a moment, everything went still. Marcus staggered back, clutching his side as blood seeped through his shirt. Adrian stood frozen, the gun now in his hands, his face pale. I ran to Marcus, my hands shaking as I tried to stop the bleeding. Why? He whispered, his voice weak. Why him? I couldn't answer. Adrian dropped the gun, his chest heaving as he stared at Marcus. He'll live, he said finally, his voice hollow. We have to go, I said, tears streaming down my face. Adrian nodded, pulling me to my feet. We left Marcus there, his blood staining the gravel road as we disappeared into the night. We didn't stop driving until dawn, the weight of what we'd done pressing down on us like a suffocating blanket. This is it, Adrian said as we pulled into a desolate rest stop. This is our life now. I nodded, though the tears in my eyes told a different story. I didn't know where we were going, or if we'd ever truly be free of Marcus's shadow. But as Adrian took my hand, his grip firm and steady, I let myself believe, for the first time in weeks, that we might have a chance. A chance to start over, a chance to rebuild, a chance to be together, no matter the cost. I didn't mean to destroy him. I didn't mean for my words to cut as deep as they did. But when Ethan slammed the door and left the house, the look on his face told me one thing. I'd crossed a line, and there was no way to take it back. Ethan had always been the steady one. Reliable, predictable, and maddeningly calm, even in the face of hardship. I used to admire that about him. But over the last few months, that calmness had started to feel like complacency, like a refusal to face the reality of the mess we were living in. It started when he lost his job at the logistics company 6 months ago. It wasn't his fault. Corporate downsizing, they said. A numbers game. Still, that didn't stop the resentment from building inside me every time I checked the bank account or saw another bill marked overdue. At first, I tried to be supportive. I told him it wasn't the end of the world, that he'd find something else soon. But as the weeks dragged on and his search for a new job seemed to go nowhere, my patience wore thin. That night was the breaking point. Dinner had been quiet, tense. Ethan was hunched over his plate, barely eating, while I sat across from him, my arms crossed. The silence between us felt heavy, suffocating, until finally I couldn't take it anymore. "Are you even trying?" I blurted out, my voice sharper than I intended. Ethan looked up, startled. "What?" "You heard me," I said, leaning forward. "Are you even trying to find a new job? Or are you just sitting around waiting for something to fall into your lap?" His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. "Of course I'm trying, Julia. Do you think I enjoy this?" "Well, it doesn't look like it," I shot back, the frustration bubbling over. "You've been home for 6 months, Ethan. 6 months. And we're barely keeping our heads above water while you just sit there." "I'm not just sitting here," he said, his voice rising. "Do you have any idea how many resumes I've sent out? How many interviews I've gone to?" "Clearly not enough," I snapped. The words hung in the air like a slap. Ethan stared at me, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists on the table. For a moment, I thought he was going to yell, to lash out, but instead he pushed back his chair and stood, his movements slow and deliberate. "You think I like this?" he said, his voice low and tight. "You think I don't feel like a failure every single day? Then do something about it," I said, my voice trembling with anger. Ethan didn't respond. He just grabbed his coat from the back of the chair and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" I demanded, standing up. "Out," he said flatly, and then the door slammed behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving, my heart pounding, and then I sank back into my chair, burying my face in my hands. I knew I'd gone too far. I knew my words had hurt him in a way that wouldn't be easy to fix. But a part of me didn't care. A part of me was too consumed by my own frustration, my own sense of helplessness, to feel guilty. An hour later, I was still sitting in the living room, nursing a glass of wine and replaying the argument in my head when there was a knock at the door. I frowned, setting the glass down and walking over to open it. "Marcus?" I said, surprised. Ethan's best friend stood on the porch, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his expensive coat, a concerned look on his face. "Hey, Julia?" he said, his voice warm and familiar. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check in. Is Ethan around?" "No," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "He's out." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't press the issue. "Rough night?" "You could say that," I muttered, walking back to the couch. Marcus followed, sitting down across from me. He'd always been the confident one, the successful one. While Ethan worked his steady, unremarkable job, Marcus was climbing the ladder in real estate, building a reputation as one of the top developers in the city. He was charming, too, in a way that made you feel like the center of the universe when he spoke to you. And right now, his full attention was on me. "Want to talk about it?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. I hesitated, but the words spilled out before I could stop them. I told him about the argument, about how frustrated I was with Ethan's lack of progress, about how scared I was for our future. Marcus listened intently, nodding at the right moments, his expression sympathetic. "You're under a lot of pressure," he said when I finished. "It's only natural to feel overwhelmed." "Yeah, well, I didn't handle it very well," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "No one's perfect," Marcus said, his tone reassuring. "But you shouldn't have to carry this weight on your own, Julia. You deserve stability. Someone who can make you feel secure." I looked up at him, startled by the intensity in his voice. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years: desire. I shook my head, trying to push the thought away. "Ethan's trying," I said weakly. "I know he is." "Trying isn't always enough," Marcus said softly, his gaze steady. His hand brushed against mine, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but it sent a shiver down my spine. The tension between us was palpable now, the air in the room thick with something unspoken. I should have pulled away, should have ended the conversation before it crossed a line. But I didn't. When Marcus sat beside me that night, I thought he was just being a friend, but the way his voice softened, the way his hand lingered on mine, it wasn't friendship. It was something far more dangerous. I didn't expect Marcus to stay. When Ethan stormed out, I thought I'd be left alone to drown in my thoughts and a second glass of wine. But Marcus didn't seem in any hurry to leave. He shrugged off his coat, draping it over the back of a chair, and settled in like he had all the time in the world. "You know," he said, leaning back slightly, "I've known Ethan for years, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen him lose his temper." I sighed, cradling my wine glass. Yeah, well, I guess I pushed him too far. Marcus tilted his head, studying me. You're hard on him. The statement wasn't judgmental, but it wasn't exactly neutral either. I know, I admitted. But it's been so much. The bills, the uncertainty, the waiting. I feel like everything is falling apart, and I'm the only one holding it together. Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. It's not easy being the strong one, is it? The way he said it made my chest tighten. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to acknowledge that, to see how hard I was trying. No, I said softly, it's not. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. You've always struck me as someone who knows what she wants, someone who doesn't settle. The words caught me off guard. What are you trying to say? Marcus smiled faintly, his eyes meeting mine. Just that you deserve more than this, Julia, more than feeling like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. His words were like a balm on an open wound, soothing and dangerous all at once. I took a sip of my wine, trying to focus on anything other than the warmth spreading through me at his attention. I'm not saying Ethan's a bad guy, Marcus continued, his tone measured. He's one of my oldest friends, but maybe he's not giving you what you need right now. I looked at him sharply, my heart skipping a beat. What are you trying to do here, Marcus? He didn't flinch. I'm just being honest. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I should have told him to leave, should have shut this down before it went any further. But instead, I stayed silent. Marcus leaned back again, his movements slow and deliberate. Do you remember the last time we all went out? That dinner at Giovanni's? I blinked, caught off guard by the change in topic. Yeah, I remember. You were laughing so much that night, he said, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. I don't think I've seen you like that in years. I frowned, unsure where he was going with this. It was just a good night, I guess. No, Marcus said, his voice soft. It wasn't just the night. It was you. You were glowing, Julia, like you didn't have the weight of the world on your shoulders for once. The room felt warmer now, the space between us shrinking even though neither of us had moved. I shifted in my seat, setting my glass down on the coffee table. You know, Marcus continued, his tone low, I always wondered how someone like you ended up with someone like Ethan. Marcus, I warned, my voice trembling slightly. He held up his hands, a small, apologetic smile on his face. I'm not trying to start anything. I think you deserve to be reminded of who you are, what you're worth. His hand brushed against mine, light and fleeting, but it sent a jolt through me that I couldn't ignore. I should have pulled away. I should have stood up and told him to leave. But instead, I looked down at our hands, at the way his fingers lingered near mine. Marcus, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes? I looked up at him, meeting his gaze. His eyes were dark, intense, filled with something I couldn't name but didn't want to escape. This isn't right, I said, though my words lacked conviction. Maybe not, he said, his voice low and even. But does it feel wrong? My breath hitched, my chest tightening as I tried to find the right words. But nothing came. Marcus shifted closer, his movements slow and deliberate, giving me every chance to stop him. His hand covered mine, warm and steady, and when he spoke again his voice was barely a murmur. Tell me to leave, Julia, he said, his eyes locked on mine. And I will. I opened my mouth, ready to tell him to go, to put an end to this before it went too far. But I didn't. The sound of the wine glass being set on the table was the only thing that broke the silence between us. Marcus leaned in slightly, his face just inches from mine. You've been holding it together for so long, he murmured. Let someone else carry it for a while. His words sent a shiver down my spine, and before I could stop myself, I leaned into him. The kiss was soft at first, tentative like he was testing the waters. But when I didn't pull away, it deepened, his hand sliding to the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair. For a moment, the weight of everything, the bills, the arguments, the suffocating tension faded away. All I could feel was the warmth of his touch, the way he made me feel seen, wanted, even cherished. But as quickly as it began, reality crashed back down on me. I pulled away, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I can't, I said, shaking my head. This isn't fair to Ethan. Marcus didn't look angry or hurt. He just nodded, his expression calm. I understand, he said softly. But as he stood and reached for his coat, his hand brushed against mine one last time, and the way he looked at me told me this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I told myself I'd put an end to it. That Marcus's lingering touch, his loaded words, were just a momentary lapse in judgment. But when Ethan left again that night, and Marcus came back, I realized the line I swore I wouldn't cross was already behind me. Ethan was gone most of the next day. He'd left early, muttering something about following up on job leads, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders slumped as he grabbed his coat. He didn't kiss me goodbye, didn't even look back as he walked out the door. I stood at the window, watching him pull out of the driveway, and for a moment I felt the familiar pang of guilt creeping in. He was trying, wasn't he? He was out there, doing whatever he could to fix the mess we were in. But then the memory of last night came flooding back. Marcus's hand on mine, the way his lips had lingered against mine, just long enough to make me forget everything else. And with that memory came something else. The thrill. The hours passed slowly, the weight of the empty house pressing down on me. I cleaned. I worked on a design project I'd been putting off. I did everything I could to distract myself. But no matter what I did, my mind kept drifting back to Marcus. When the doorbell rang just after 6, I wasn't surprised. I opened the door to find him standing there, dressed casually in dark jeans and a fitted sweater, his hands tucked into his pockets. He smiled, that same confident, easy smile that made it impossible to look away. "Marcus," I said, my voice shaky. "What are you doing here?" "I figured you could use some company," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I should have stopped him. I should have told him to leave. But instead, I closed the door behind him, the soft click echoing in the quiet house. "You're not worried Ethan will come back?" I asked, trying to sound more composed than I felt. Marcus shrugged, leaning casually against the kitchen counter. "He's out job hunting, right? He'll be gone for hours." The casual way he said it made my stomach twist, a mix of excitement and dread. "This isn't a good idea," I said, though I didn't move to stop him when he stepped closer. "Maybe not," he said, his voice low, his eyes locking onto mine. "But does it feel like a bad one?" His hand brushed against mine, light and fleeting, and I felt my resolve waver. There was something about Marcus, something magnetic, undeniable. He had a way of making you feel like the center of his world, like nothing else mattered but you. "Marcus," I started, but he cut me off, his voice soft but firm. "Tell me to leave, Julia," he said, stepping even closer. "If that's what you want, I'll walk out that door and never look back." I opened my mouth to say it, to tell him to go, but the words caught in my throat, because I didn't want him to leave. He closed the distance between us, his hand sliding to the back of my neck, his touch gentle but commanding. His lips brushed against mine, tentative at first, giving me one last chance to pull away. But I didn't. The kiss deepened, his hands moving to my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space between us. My heart was pounding, my breath hitching as his touch ignited something in me I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just desire. It was validation. A reminder that I was still seen, still wanted. We moved to the living room, the tension between us growing with every passing second. Marcus guided me to the couch, his hands steady, his movements deliberate. He was careful, patient, like he was savoring every moment, and it made my chest tighten with something I couldn't quite name. "This isn't fair," I whispered, my voice trembling. "To who?" he murmured, his lips brushing against my collarbone. "To Ethan?" "To any of us," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they didn't carry the weight I wanted them to. Marcus pulled back slightly, his hand cupping my cheek, his eyes searching mine. "Do you want me to stop?" I hesitated, my breath catching. The rational part of me screamed yes, begged me to put an end to this before it went too far. But the part of me that was drowning, that had been suffocating in my own resentment and loneliness, whispered no. The rest of the world faded away after that. Marcus's touch was firm but careful, his lips trailing a path down my neck, his hands exploring with a confidence that left me breathless. I clung to him, my hands tangling in his shirt, my body arching into his as if he were the lifeline I didn't know I needed. Every kiss, every touch felt electric, like I was coming alive after years of being numb. He moved with purpose, but there was no rush, no urgency. It was like he wanted to memorize every inch of me, to leave a mark that no one else could erase. When it was over, we lay tangled together on the couch, the room quiet except for the sound of our breathing. Marcus's arm was draped over my waist, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my skin. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice gentle. I nodded, though my chest felt tight with a mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. "Yeah," I said quietly. He tilted my chin up, his eyes meeting mine. "I meant what I said, Julia. You deserve better than this." His words sent a pang through my chest, but I didn't respond. Because no matter how much I wanted to believe him, I couldn't ignore the weight of what we'd just done. The clock on the wall read 10:15 when I finally sat up, the reality of the situation crashing down on me like a wave. Ethan could be home any minute, and the thought of him walking in on this, on us, made my stomach churn. "I should go," Marcus said, sitting up beside me. I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "Yeah, that's probably a good idea." He stood, pulling on his jacket, his movements slow and deliberate. When he turned back to me, his expression was unreadable. "This doesn't have to be the end," he said softly. I didn't respond, couldn't respond. All I could do was watch as he walked to the door and let himself out, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence of the house. When Ethan came home an hour later, his expression was tired but hopeful. He kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and sat down at the table to eat the leftovers I'd reheated for him. I tried to act normal, to pretend like everything was fine. But every time he smiled at me, every time he reached across the table to hold my hand, I felt the weight of my betrayal pressing down on me. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd crossed a line I couldn't come back from. I thought I'd hidden it well. I thought Marcus and I had left no trace of what happened between us. But when Ethan came home early that night and stood in the doorway, staring at me like a stranger, I knew everything I'd feared was about to come crashing down. Ethan had been distant since the argument, but his quiet demeanor wasn't anything new. He'd always been the kind of man who kept his emotions locked away, never one to lash out or start fights. That's why it felt safe, dangerously so. I assumed he wouldn't push, wouldn't question. That evening, he'd left the house again, saying he had a lead on a position at a local warehouse. I wished him good luck, guilt tightening my chest, but I didn't let it show. I needed him to believe everything was normal. I didn't expect him to come home early. Marcus arrived just after Ethan left. He was more confident this time, stepping into the house without hesitation, his grin sly and easy. "You're lucky," he said, shrugging off his jacket and draping it over the back of the couch. "I had some time to kill. Thought I'd come by and check on you." "Check on me?" I repeated, folding my arms across my chest. He moved closer, his eyes locking onto mine with that same magnetic intensity. "You seemed tense last time. I wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine," I said, though the tightness in my throat betrayed me. "Are you?" he asked, his voice soft, coaxing. I didn't answer. It didn't take long for the conversation to shift. Marcus had a way of getting under my skin, of breaking down every barrier I tried to put up. "Tell me something, Julia," he said, leaning against the counter. "When was the last time someone made you feel like you mattered? Like you were more than just someone's wife?" "Marcus." "I'm serious," he pressed, stepping closer. His hand found mine, his touch warm and deliberate. "You deserve to feel seen, Julia. And if Ethan can't do that, why shouldn't someone else?" My breath caught, my chest tightening as I tried to pull away. "This is a mistake," I whispered. "Maybe," he said, his voice low. "But it doesn't feel like one." It was all too familiar. The heat of his touch, the way his lips moved against mine with a confidence that left no room for doubt. I let myself get lost in it again, my guilt shoved aside by the thrill of being wanted. We didn't go far this time. We didn't need to. The couch became our refuge, his hands roaming with a familiarity that made my skin flush. But then I heard it, the soft click of the front door opening. My heart stopped. Marcus froze above me, his body tense, his eyes snapping toward the doorway. And there was Ethan, standing there, his keys still in his hand, his face pale and expressionless. For a moment, the three of us were caught in a suspended silence, the weight of what was happening crashing down on me like a tidal wave. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't respond. He didn't yell or scream. He didn't even look angry. He just stared, his eyes empty, his jaw tight. Marcus stood slowly, adjusting his shirt, his confidence visibly shaken. "Ethan," he said, his voice steady but guarded. "This isn't what it looks like." Ethan's laugh was sharp and bitter, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Really, Marcus? That's what you're going with?" "Look, man," Marcus started, but Ethan held up a hand, silencing him. "Don't," Ethan said, his voice low and cold. "Just don't." He turned his gaze to me then, and the look in his eyes made my stomach churn. It wasn't anger or betrayal, it was something worse. Disappointment. "How long?" he asked, his tone flat. "Ethan, how long?" he repeated, his voice rising just enough to make me flinch. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my heart pounding in my chest. It was just once," I said, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything," he repeated, his voice dripping with bitterness. "You're sitting there with my best friend, and you're telling me it didn't mean anything?" "Ethan, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." "But it did," he said sharply, his voice cracking. Marcus took a step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Look, Ethan, let's just talk about this, okay? There's no need to make it worse than it already is." Ethan's eyes snapped to him, and for a moment I thought he might hit him. But instead, he took a deep breath, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "Get out," Ethan said, his voice low and shaking with barely contained rage. "Ethan?" I said, "Get out." Marcus hesitated, his gaze flicking to me, but when Ethan took a step toward him, he grabbed his jacket and left without another word. The door slammed shut behind him, and suddenly, it was just the two of us. The silence was deafening, the weight of it pressing down on me like a physical force. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at the spot where Marcus had been. "Ethan," I said softly, my voice trembling, "please, let me explain." He turned to me then, his expression unreadable, his eyes cold. "Explain what, Julia? That you've been sneaking around with my best friend? That you've been lying to me while I've been out there trying to fix our life?" "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Sorry doesn't fix this," he said, his voice hard. "Sorry doesn't undo what you've done." I wanted to reach for him, to beg him to forgive me, but the look on his face stopped me in my tracks. "I thought I knew you," he said, his voice quiet but filled with pain. "I thought I could trust you." "You can," I said desperately. "I made a mistake, Ethan, a terrible mistake. But I love you. I want to fix this." "Fix this?" he repeated, his laugh bitter and hollow. "How do you fix something like this, Julia? How do you fix breaking someone's trust?" I didn't have an answer. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, the silence stretching between us like an unbridgeable chasm. Finally, he shook his head, his jaw tight. "I need time," he said, his voice strained. "I need space." "Ethan, don't," he said sharply, cutting me off. "Just don't." And then he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the wreckage of everything we'd built together. Ethan wasn't the type to lash out. I thought his silence meant he was trying to process what I'd done, maybe even consider forgiving me. But I was wrong. The quiet wasn't acceptance. It was strategy. And I didn't realize that until it was too late. The next few days were unbearable. Ethan barely looked at me, let alone spoke. He went about his day as if I didn't exist, eating breakfast in silence, leaving for hours without saying where he was going, and coming home late with the same stoic expression that made my stomach churn. At first, I thought he just needed space. I convinced myself he was grieving, trying to decide if our marriage was worth saving. But the longer the silence stretched, the more I realized something had shifted. Ethan wasn't just pulling away, he was shutting me out completely. One morning, as I stood in the kitchen making coffee, Ethan walked in. He didn't say anything, just grabbed his travel mug and filled it, his movements sharp and deliberate. "Ethan," I said softly, my voice hesitant. He didn't respond, didn't even glance at me. "Please," I tried again. "Can we just talk? I know I've hurt you, but I want to fix this. I need to fix this." He finally looked at me then, his eyes cold and unreadable. "You want to fix this?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Then why don't you start by being honest, for once?" "I am being honest," I said, tears welling up. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Honest? Right. Because you were so honest when you let Marcus into this house, when you let him touch you, when you lied to my face every single day." "Ethan, Please, I begged, my voice breaking. It was a mistake. No, he snapped, cutting me off. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the store. What you did, that wasn't a mistake, that was a choice. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. He was right. I had chosen Marcus, even if only for a moment. I had chosen to betray Ethan, and now I was paying the price. But there was something else in his voice, something darker. Where are you going? I asked as he grabbed his keys. To handle something, he said flatly, and then he was gone. Later that afternoon, I found out exactly what he meant by handle something. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. I hesitated before opening it, my heart racing as I read the message. Your husband showed up at my office today. You need to call me. A wave of panic washed over me. I called Marcus immediately, my hands trembling as I waited for him to pick up. What happened? I asked as soon as he answered. Ethan came by unannounced, Marcus said, his voice tight. He walked right into my office and told me he knows everything. Said I have two options. Either I step back from my business dealings with him, or he makes sure everyone knows what happened. What does that mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It means your husband is playing hardball, Marcus said bitterly. He's threatening to go public, Julia. With everything. The affair, my reputation, my clients. It's all on the line. I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me. What are you going to do? Marcus sighed. What choice do I have? If I fight back, he'll destroy me. But I'm not going to let him intimidate me either. He needs to know this isn't just about him. What does that mean? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. It means he can't control this, Julia, Marcus said firmly. You and I, what we have, it's not his decision to make. When I hung up, I felt more lost than ever. Ethan's silence wasn't just pain, it was calculated. He was using me, as leverage against Marcus. And as much as I wanted to believe it was his way of coping, I couldn't ignore the possibility that it was something darker. That night, Ethan came home late again. I waited for him in the living room, my hands clasped tightly in my lap as I tried to steady my breathing. We need to talk, I said as soon as he walked in. He didn't respond, just shrugged off his coat and hung it on the rack. Ethan, I said more firmly, I know you went to see Marcus. He froze, his back to me, before turning slowly. So he told you? Of course he did, I said, my voice trembling. What are you doing, Ethan? What's your plan here? My plan, he repeated, his voice calm but sharp. My plan is to make sure the two of you don't get away with this. I'm not trying to get away with anything, I said desperately. I just want to make things right. Make things right? He said, his laugh bitter and cold. How do you make things right, Julia? By erasing what you did? By pretending like it never happened? I don't know, I admitted, tears streaming down my face. But I can't lose you, Ethan. I can't lose us. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he shook his head. You already lost me, Julia. The moment you let him into this house, into our life, you lost me. Then why are you still here? I asked, my voice breaking. Because this isn't just about you, he said coldly. This is about me. About taking back control of my life, my dignity. His words cut deeper than anything he'd said before. And I realized then that Ethan wasn't just angry, he was vengeful. Over the next few days, Ethan's behavior grew more calculated. He started making decisions without consulting me, asserting control over the household in subtle but deliberate ways. He stopped asking me how my day was or if I needed help with anything. Instead, he focused on himself, on his job search, on his routines, on his newfound sense of power. And as much as I wanted to believe he was trying to move forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was setting the stage for something bigger. Something I wouldn't see coming. I thought I could hold everything together, that somehow I could fix what I'd broken. But Ethan wasn't the same man anymore. Neither was I. And the more I tried to mend the pieces, the more I realized they might not fit back together at all. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It had become a battlefield, silent but heavy with tension, where every glance, every step, felt like a move in a game I couldn't win. Ethan had always been quiet, but now his silence was a weapon. He didn't yell, didn't accuse me outright, but his coldness seeped into every corner of the house, turning even the smallest interaction into a reminder of what I'd done. One night, As I was cleaning up after dinner, Ethan sat down at the table with his laptop. He didn't say anything at first, just opened it and started typing. The soft clicking of the keys filling the room. "What are you working on?" I asked hesitantly, desperate for some semblance of normalcy. He didn't look up. "Job applications." I nodded, unsure of what else to say. "That's good." He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Marcus offered me a position today," he said finally, his voice flat. My heart stopped. "What?" "He called me this afternoon," Ethan continued, his tone even, "said he wanted to make amends, offered me a managerial role in one of his projects." I stared at him, my mind racing. "And, what did you say?" "I told him I'd think about it," Ethan said, finally looking up at me. His eyes were calm, but there was something behind them, something calculating. "Ethan," I started, my voice trembling. "You can't work with him, not after everything that's happened." "Why not?" he asked, his tone sharp. "It's not like he cares about loyalty. Clearly, neither do you." The words stung, but I didn't argue. What could I say? Over the next few days, Ethan's behavior became harder to predict. He alternated between icy detachment and subtle acts of control, taking over tasks I usually handled, making plans without consulting me, leaving the house without saying where he was going. One evening, he came home late with a new suit slung over his arm. "What's that for?" I asked, watching as he hung it in the closet. "An event," he said simply. "What event?" "A networking gala," he replied, not bothering to elaborate. "Are you going alone?" He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "Does it matter?" I didn't press him, but the pit in my stomach grew. Ethan wasn't just shutting me out. He was building a life that didn't include me. And as much as I wanted to believe we could find our way back to each other, I couldn't ignore the growing distance between us. Meanwhile, Marcus kept trying to contact me. At first, I ignored his calls and texts, but one afternoon, I finally picked up. "Julia," he said, relief evident in his voice, "I was starting to think you'd blocked me." "I probably should have," I said, my tone sharp. "Look, I know things are tense right now," Marcus said, "but I meant what I said. You deserve better than this. You deserve to be happy." "And what? You think you're the one to make me happy?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I know I can," he said finally, "but only if you're willing to take that step." I hung up without responding, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. Marcus's words echoed in my mind, pulling at something deep inside me. A longing for the life I thought I wanted, the life I thought he could offer. But every time I thought about leaving, about starting over with Marcus, Ethan's face flashed in my mind. The anger, the hurt, the quiet devastation I'd caused. Could I really abandon him now, after everything I'd done? The breaking point came on a Saturday evening. Ethan was in the living room, going through a stack of paperwork, when I finally decided I couldn't take the silence anymore. "We need to talk," I said, standing in the doorway. He didn't look up. "About what?" "About us," I said, my voice trembling. "About where we go from here." He set the papers down, leaning back in his chair. "What do you want me to say, Julia? That I forgive you? That we can just go back to the way things were?" "No," I said softly. "I know things can't go back to the way they were, but I want to try. I want to fix this." Ethan stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Fix it?" he repeated. "You think this is something you can fix?" "I don't know," I admitted, tears welling up. "But I want to try. I love you, Ethan. I always have." He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You don't love me, Julia. You love the idea of me, the steady husband, the provider. But the second I couldn't live up to that, you went looking for someone else." "That's not true," I said, my voice breaking. "I made a mistake, Ethan. A terrible mistake. But it doesn't mean I don't love you." He stood then, his movements slow and deliberate. "You say you love me," he said, his voice low. "But do you even know what that means?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. "I'm not leaving," Ethan said finally, his tone firm. "Not yet. But don't think for a second that things will ever be the same." "What does that mean?" I asked, my chest tightening. "It means," he said, looking me directly in the eyes, "you made your choice, Julia, and now I'm making mine." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, the weight of his words crushing me. That night, I sat alone in the bedroom, staring at the suitcase I'd packed weeks ago but never used. The choice was still mine to make: stay and try to repair what was left of our marriage, or leave and risk everything for a life I wasn't sure I wanted. But for the first time, I wasn't sure if Ethan would even care. The next morning, as the sun filtered through the curtains, I stood in the doorway of our house, my suitcase at my feet. I looked back one last time, the weight of everything I was leaving behind pressing down on me. I didn't know if I was making the right choice. I didn't know if I'd ever find what I was looking for. But as I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay in the ruins of what I'd destroyed.